Okay. Okay, so before I get going, which I am going to get going, of course you can't really see this one well. Probably a little better. Any questions for me? You all got Cloud9 working, okay, when it's working? And
now it's working.
You can write code and you're developing and it's okay? Yes?
I've got a question kind of about Cloud9 in the first exercise. So you said that the email form,
yes,
if it doesn't work.
The email does not work,
okay?
So don't panic. It's okay. In order to get the email to work, you would have to configure Cloud9 server to make it work.
Yeah.
This is a out-of-the-box configuration to avoid spamming. You know, you can get your Gmail account, if you have a Gmail account, to be a relay for sending, but then you have to turn the security down and they send you all sorts of warnings about that. So don't worry about it. The point of this assignment is to get data from your form to spit out on your web page. Okay, that's the point, yes.
I think we're not even really going the mail route. We're going to send it to a database anyways. Right?
That is correct. So in fact, today, by the end of today, we will be taking data from a form and putting it in a database, which is cool.
Much better.
Week 2, we're going to take data, we're going to get data into our form, into a web page, send it in a database. That's pretty awesome. Next week, we'll be taking data out of a database and displaying that on a web page. So we're cooking with gas already. Okay. All right. So again, a little review of each week. If you'll see, I've already posted week 3 for those who want to get a head start. I would strongly recommend that as soon as you finish the week 2 stuff, start on the week 3 stuff. Before I lecture on it, again, my warning about you want to be working ahead because these first few chapters are easy, but by the time we get through chapter 4 and especially 5, it gets harder. And if you want to save it until lab day, you won't hit the deadline. All right, the deadline is for this class Thursday at midnight. You have to get it posted, whether I checked it off or not. You only get points if you show it to me running and it's in Blackboard. Make sense? Okay. So all of my lecture notes are broken out per week. The readings are up here. This will be the agenda. The material is all down here. I have a whole bunch of links. Most of them take you out to the PHP manual. It is basically a synopsis of what the book is trying to cover. Okay, it's the Reader's Digest version of what the main salient points of that particular chapter are. Sometimes I throw things in that aren't in the chapter because I think you ought to know you need to know this stuff. Down at the very bottom, sorry if I'm making you dizzy, I'll have a lab that we'll do today, which is pretty awesome. But these are the labs or test drives that you will owe me, okay? So just for this week, you've got 2 chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2. These are all the test drives in your book. A question that came up, do I need a separate directory for each of these test drives? No. One directory, start working on them, and just continue to add to them. And then what you're turning in is the final stuff, okay, is the completion. Again, when we go to Cloud9, when we go to Cloud9 environment, I showed you how to download the lecture material. And let's see, here's the lab. So like in week 2 right here, I downloaded chapter 1 and chapter 2. You have a final folder, which is the final solution if you get stuck, and an initial folder. You work out of this initial folder right here, and that's what I'm looking at, okay? Also, if you haven't already done so, show of hands, who signed up for Slack? Okay, if you have not, you need to sign up for Slack. Also, I put out a little message in Slack. I would appreciate it if you could put a picture of yourself. It's going to help me associate your face with your name and help me learn your name quicker. It also gives us a sense of community, all right? and I want you to collaborate with each other in Slack. If you have trouble signing up for Slack, let me know, and if I need to send you another invite, I can send you another invite. I think the invite's posted on Blackboard someplace in my first announcement, so you should just have to click on that and you're good to go. But if that's not working for you, let me know. Again, you can collaborate for your test drives. If you go into Blackboard under the weekly lab submissions, so this is week 2, I will post week 3's up shortly, but I have randomly paired you up. So if you are, Joe, you're going to need to reach out to Fabrice on Slack. And you guys can collaborate on your test drives, send screenshots or code snippets or question each other or send a link. Hey, you want to run my, if you have it in a public space, send them the link to it and say, hey, do you want to run my web application and see if you can find any bugs? Vice versa, okay? So you guys can collaborate over Slack, and then you're good to go. When I check it off, I like to do it in pairs. I want you to sit with your pairs through the week. I switch this up every week, although you might say, hey, I was with Fabrice last week. Why am I with Fabrice again this week? Because it's pseudo-random and not random, all right? So that's okay, all right? Any questions so far?
Yeah, so you had, under your chapter 1 in Cloud 9, you had like the final initial folder.
Yeah.
Do we get that from somewhere?
You did. If you go out to the home page and you click on this link right here, this downloads this zip file right here. See? Okay. That's the zip file for every single chapter. When you're running Cloud 9 in Chrome, apparently I'm told it works in the latest version of Firefox too, you can drag files from your host, like if you're running Windows, from Windows Explorer, you can drag those file folders over into your Cloud 9 navigation window. Really cool. When you download from Cloud 9, you're going to get a zip file of whatever folder that you downloaded. Yes?
Do you want us to upload to Slack for the entire chapter 1 or just our initial folder?
So it's probably going to be easiest for you. So let's take this as an example. Let's say I worked in the initial folder here, and then I worked in the initial folder here, and I'm ready to submit it. You do not need to pull any of this stuff out. Just go right up to week 2, right click, and select download and submit that zip file.
And both of those, so chapter 1 and chapter 2 for week 2 are due this Thursday?
Thursday by midnight. That is correct. I will also start having instructions for how to dump your database starting, that might be week 3 or week 4. I can't remember. Right? But I'll have you dump your database. So you'll put your database dump will be a .sql file of all of your database, all of your tables, all of your entries, and I'll want you to put that in one of the root folders of week 2 or week 3, whatever, and then then download it, because downloading it will create a compressed copy of those folders, and then I'll have your SQL file. Then I can reproduce everything you have. Make sense? Okay, excellent. All right, great questions. So, week 2, here's our agenda. I'm going to basically talk to you a little bit about PHP and how it works with HTML, talk about data types and what are the types of variables, using HTML forms, form variables, talk about the post-Superglobal, which your chapter talks about, adding data to a database using a form and MySQL functions. What we're going to be doing on this, we'll be doing a little demo lab. We'll be creating a database for our full name, first and last name. I'll show you how to create that. We'll be using that database in the demo lab to get data from a form into the database, and then we'll go into the database tool, the command line tool, because I'll show you how to use that command line tool, which means that you're going to be using a shell in the Unix operating system, which is good practice for you, all right? And I think that's where we'll end. And since I know we're not meeting on Thursday, because they've closed the campus all the way through Friday morning, if we have extra time and people want me to check something off, I can do that, okay? All right, so mixing in PHP. As I mentioned, PHP was designed from the ground up as a web development language. So it was designed to work seamlessly with HTML. So this is a little trivial example. This should be familiar to you, right? I've got a HTML opening and closing tag, a head and body, a title, and then somewhere down here in the body, I have these weird looking tags right here. These are PHP tags. When the web server, in our case that'll probably be Apache, when the web server encounters this, if PHP is installed, this gets handed off to the PHP interpreter. And so the interpreter will run very similar to like JavaScript interpreter running in your browser. This interpreter runs on the server. Okay, so this is server-side code. And then if there's any output to the web page, that gets converted back out to HTML and handed to the Apache web server. So this will get printed out, it's such a perfect day, to the web page in between the H1 tags right here. Okay? So that's code embedded right in our HTML document. Let's take a look at a bad example. Okay, there's just a little bit of difference between these two, but what do you think might not be such a good idea? Yeah. Now, you know, you might not always be able to avoid that. Maybe you've created some different style or classes or whatever, and depending upon what's going on in your PHP code, you can output that. But generally speaking, you would like to separate your style, you know, keep that in your CSS as much as possible. Yes?
So in the test drive example for chapter 1, they do have HTML inside quotes, but they have an echo.
Yes.
So what's the difference between the print and the echo, and is HTML allowed in one versus the other?
Yeah, so print and echo are identical, except that I believe print has a return value. Print is a function. Doesn't look like it because you don't see the parentheses here, but they're both functions. They can be used inside with parentheses as well, but print has a return value. Most people use echo. Okay, so if print, for example, fails, you might want to know that, so you get a return value. Also, sometimes it's better to go in and out of PHP. If you've got just a little bit of PHP, using an echo to echo out a tremendous amount of HTML is not a great idea, and it's onerous. Okay, you will see that the book uses a lot of examples like that, which are not great examples. It's not necessarily professional. And again, as I mentioned, it's not the best professional example of code in the book. Okay?
So in our test drive, should we be removing HTML from the echo?
No, no. Only when you get annoyed and say, I can go, when you feel comfortable about moving in and out yourself, hey, this would be more efficient if I do it this way. 95% of writing code is common sense. Okay? Okay, so yes, that's correct. Let's talk about commenting your code. We've got the same rules as JavaScript and most every other programming language that we use. Single line comments start with 2 forward slashes, and everything written on that line is treated as a comment. Multi-line comments start with a / asterisk, and they can span multiple lines until the asterisk and the / is encountered. I have this comment here. We all write code for a reason. We may need at times to share why something is the way it is. Our code says how something is done. Our comments should say the why, okay, not the how. In fact, let me show you a bad commenting example. So, does anybody know what this monstrosity is? That is correct. Who likes regex? Awesome. That's good. For those of you who didn't put your hand up, look at these two people who did put their hand up. If you ever have a person on your team that loves regex, you want to feed and water them often, okay? I will tell you my first encounter and stories about regex when we do regex. That I think we will do regex. I can't remember what week it is that we do it. But I'll talk to you about regex. All right, so let's look at this comment. We are formatting phone numbers by stripping all characters and putting parens around the first 3 numbers, blah, 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 blah. That's exactly what this does. It says how it's happening. So you want to write comments that your manager or non-coders can understand. Can a non-coder understand this? Do you think this would be a better comment? Yes. So my view on commenting. Oh, by the way, I told you that don't intermix this stuff. And look, this example is intermixed. So bad example, right? Because I've got the 2 vertical curly brackets vertical and then not over here. This actually does follow the PHP coding standards, which is horrible. Don't do this. If you're going to start like this, then make sure this is right over here. Otherwise, line them all up vertically. Okay, so don't mix them like that. So bad style in here. All right, why is this better? Because it's succinct and saying exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing or what I'm doing. Okay, and this is the how. The code is always that. So the best thing that you can do is write variables that are very detailed on their purpose. Remember from JavaScript, your variables are what a program knows. Your functions are what a program does. Okay? And your programs are made up of what you know and what they do. And this carries on to object-oriented programming as well. You don't have to, please do not comment every single line of code. But please use comments. As I'm going through and looking at your test drives, I will nag you on an appropriate way to comment. All right? Like, for example, you know you're going to always have to open up a database connection with a MySQL connect function, which we'll get into later. So does it make sense to say opening up database connection? No, you always have to do that, and when you see that function, it's going to be pretty self-explanatory. What you really want to say is, okay, I know I need to open the connection, I know I have to create a query string, I know I have to query the database for some stuff, okay, or insert something. So why don't you just take a step back and say, these 3 or 4 lines of code is to insert this information into the database. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, commenting is also common sense, right? Okay, so main block explains why. All right, data types. So PHP supports the following fundamental basic data types, also known as scalar types. Okay, you might have heard them called primitives or something like that. So we have integers, floats, strings, and booleans. I have a link here. So if I click on this link, this is going to tell me all the data types in that the PHP manual is talking about. So these are the scalar types: boolean, integer, float, and string. And then we have compound types, which are arrays, objects, callable, iterable. We'll talk more about those, okay, in a bit. So what is the difference between an integer and a float? You know, a floating point has a decimal point after it. Okay, I have a fractional part of that number essentially. What is a string? A group of characters enclosed in either single or double quotes. Quotes must match. So we will talk about the difference between when I have a string in double quotes versus single quotes. There is special meaning behind this in PHP. I'll talk about this in a few minutes. Okay, here's a strange thing called the here document method of quoting strings. So let's say you have a boatload of text that you want to put out to the web page. You could say print or echo, and then you have these 3 left angle brackets and some character code on its own line. Everything following will go out to the web page, printed out to the web page, until whatever you put up here for this code is encountered on a line of its own, followed by a semicolon. It's kind of strange. You may see it. I don't see it used very often, but if you do see it, now you know what it is. Okay? All right, so a Boolean, just like in JavaScript, I get a true or a false. There's a lot of similarities between PHP and JavaScript. And then, as I mentioned, PHP has composite data types. Arrays we know about. They work very similar as they do in JavaScript. The thing is that we also have this thing called an associative array. We'll talk more about that. Let me see. I'm going to click on this link and see if it talks about it. An array in PHP is actually an ordered map. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So you can have a key-value pair. All right, there's several ways. We'll get into it, I think, in next week or the week afterwards. Let's see, if you have numbers in between the square brackets, it's a numeric array, numerically indexed. You know what those are. If you have strings with either single or double quotes, it's an associative array that allows you to associate some named key with a value. So instead of the number 0 through n as an index into a value at an element location, I have strings. Okay? They're a lot nicer to use. They make a lot more sense. Okay, so I have arrays, we have objects. We'll talk in week 10 and 11. I'm going to take a little detour from the book. Since how many of you are enrolled in Java or already took Java? Okay, so that's most of you. For those of you who are currently enrolled, by the time we get to week 10 and 11, I'm going to cover classes week 10, and I'll cover inheritance on week 11. You'll go, wow, this works just like Java. I don't really have to exercise my brain that much. That's the idea. PHP is an object-oriented programming language, but because you're learning so much with how to integrate it with HTML and MySQL at the same time, we'll let you learn about object-oriented programming in Java, and you'll see that, it looks pretty much the same in PHP, okay? For some strange type, null is considered a composite type, okay? A unassigned value is typically a null value or a variable that you haven't assigned anything to, like undefined. And then resources. Resources are things like when you open up a file handle, or when you open up a connection to a database. Those are resources. Okay. So, what is a null data type? Null represents a variable with no value. Okay. What is a resource? I talked about that. And I talked about objects. Okay, as I mentioned, PHP is a dynamically data typed language. What does that mean?
You need to specify the data types in your variables?
Okay, like as you're defining them or as you assign things to them?
As you're defining them.
That would be a statically typed language, which is Java, because in Java you have to put in, that's fine, but in Java you would say int, the name of my variable, and then you're saying forever, for as long as this variable is in scope, it's an integer.
Right.
So float, whatever the variable name is, as long as this variable is in scope, it's a floating point value. That's a statically typed language. In PHP and JavaScript, we don't declare the type of the variable, and we can change the type of its variable at runtime, right?
You got it.
Is that safe?
No, it's broken.
Okay, so thank goodness we have these functions right here, get type. So get type will return the variable data type as a string of what that data type is. So you just pass it in as a parameter, and you get back, hey, I'm a Boolean or an integer or a double or whatever. And I have here, if you want to just, well, I could do this right now. Let's take a look at this, datatypes.php. So I'm declaring all these variables right here, and I will cover more of this, but the difference between PHP and JavaScript in here is when you're creating a variable in JavaScript, it's var space the name of the variable, right? Right? Remember that? In PHP, replace var space with the $sign. Okay, so that's how we declare a variable in PHP. All right, so I got all these variables and a class, and I'm putting together a table, and you can see I'm calling the get type right here. This is the headers right here, but I'm calling the get types, and I'm passing in its actual value right here. I'm sorry, the actual variable right here, and it's going to return whatever its type is. So if I were to just, I'm going to copy this whole thing. No, not like that. How about like this? I'll go into Cloud 9 here, and let's see, I'll go down to lecture, nope, lecture demos. I'm going to create a file, right click, new file. I'll call it datatypes.php. By the way, make sure this is red and running. And I'll paste this code in. I'm going to click on this right here, open up that tab. Hopefully that works. Maybe not. Maybe I have to refresh it. Let's do that. Or maybe it's not going to work today. Oh, there it is. Okay, spring 2019, lecture demos, Tuesday, Thursday, week 2. There's data types. This is the get type response right here. Does that make sense? So why might I use this? Well, maybe I want to convert a type, and maybe I have some code that converts it depending upon what the user entered into a form or whatever. Okay? And maybe later on down the line I need to check what type that is because I'm going to do something different based on that. Okay. Okay, what kind of variables can we have in PHP? We can have predefined variables. Predefined variables are like superglobals. They usually start with a $, underscore, and are in all caps. So PHP will predefine those variables. The post superglobal is one of them, although that's arguable because they could be considered form variables related to names in an HTML form. We've got user-defined variables. Those are variables you create. Valid variable names. Okay, all variables start with a $, followed by a letter or an underscore. And then you can have, after that, numbers if you want to. So these are valid variable names. These are invalid variable names. String interpolation or concatenation. Okay, so earlier I mentioned to you there is a big difference between double-quoted strings and single-quoted strings. Okay, so first let's talk about this idea of string interpolation. Let's grab this right here. and I will create a new script. We'll call it interpolation.php. And I will paste this in. Semicolon right here. And I will say $name. Let's get rid of the variable. Equals Ken Marks. Okay? What is this going to output to the web page? Hello, Ken Marks. Hello, are you in there? Did I put you in the wrong place? Oh, it's still thinking. There it is. Hello, Ken Marks. So let's say I modify this with single quotes. Now what's it going to output? Hello, $name, and the clue is the color coding here. That is correct. So hello, $name. Okay, so this is the definition of interpolation. When I have double quotes right here, and I have a variable, the value of what's contained in there gets interpolated. So whatever was assigned to this variable will get output. If I have single quotes, variable interpolation does not happen. It is literally what's ever in those quotes. Okay? So it's important to know the difference between that. All right? Concatenation, how do we concatenate strings in JavaScript? We use the plus sign, right? In PHP, you use the dot operator. Okay? So just think, oh, it's PHP, not JavaScript. That needs to be a dot, not a plus. Just like, oh, that needs to be a $, not a var space. Okay? Semicolons are required in PHP. Managing variables. So the PHP language has a whole bunch of functions that will tell us if this variable is an integer, in addition to getting the type. Is it an integer? Is it a scalar? Is it a string? Is it null? Is it an object? Is it numeric? Etc., etc. Is it Boolean? These two functions right here, isSet or empty, these are going to be the two most functions that you use. Any idea, by the way, I have links here. Any idea why you might, well, let's go take a look at it. isSet. Determine if a variable is set and is not null. Okay? So if a variable has been unset with unset, it will no longer be set, whatever. Okay? With multiple parameters, all right, forget the multiple parameters. So does this variable contain a value? And is it not null? Empty. Determine whether a variable is empty. Determine whether a variable is considered to be empty. A variable is considered empty if it does not exist or if its value equals false. Okay? Can you think of any reasons why I might want to use a function like this?
If you're not getting any output on the page, your variable might not have gotten any value assigned to it. So
correct. And how would I be wanting to assign values to a variable? In that case.
Oh, in that case, like, well, you could do it through a form, or you could assign it, and yeah.
So if I have a form and people don't enter anything into it, I have an issue, right? Now, have you ever filled out a form? It's got 26 entries in it, and you forgot one, and it sent you back. And worse yet, it didn't even retain. By the way, if you see that, you should run. They don't, especially if it's a financial institution, if the programmers are not smart enough to make your data that you already entered in there stick, either via JavaScript or PHP, then they're not smart enough to protect your financial information, right? Okay, just saying. All right. By the way, you can do all that in JavaScript too. Okay. Yeah. So you're gonna see is set and empty or not empty, with an exclamation point a lot.
Yeah, it's still an exclamation point for the not.
It's an exclamation point for the not. That is correct. The logic that you learned, and I know we're going to go through that. I think we may cover that next week. There's a precedence chart, is going to be pretty much the same.
Okay.
Although I'll have a few things. There's some additions, and a couple of the logical additions are annoying, and I'll point those out. Okay, let's talk about form variables. So let's take a look at a typical form. So I've got this form, postform.html. All right, let's just go down. This is just an HTML document. If we go down to you see I have a form. Let's look at the form. My action is I'm going to call some some script called postformProcess.php, right? And the method is post. We've seen this before. So I'm posting some data that a user will enter in to these text entries right here, right? So I've got a text entry for your name, for your phone, and for your email, and then I've got a submit button. I've got name attributes. In JavaScript, we work with the ID attributes, right? Okay. In server-side code, you're going to work with the name attributes. Now in JavaScript, you can work with the name attributes as well, right, when you're working with the DOM. All right, so I have a name attribute. Please note what they're called, because we're going to come back to this. Okay, so name is your underscore name. For the name, for the phone, the name attribute is your underscore phone, and the email name attribute is your email adder. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this form right here, and I'm going to create a document called postform.html. Postform.html. I'm going to paste this code in here. Okay. Do not know what was happening there. Let's start that up again. All right. Save that. Refresh that. Okay. So here's what our form looks like. Now, if I press submit, what's going to happen? I should get a 404 error, right?
Yep.
Okay. Because it can't find this. All right, good. So now what we want to do is create that postformProcess.php file, right? So let's take a look at it. Now this is a little different than what your book talks about, and we're not going to be doing it this way because there's all kinds of things wrong with it, but it's a simplified example. So when we get into using the post Superglobal variable in a few minutes, that's going to be the kind of the way that you're going to want to do it. All right? But I will walk you through this. So this is the form that gets called, and we've got this magic function right here called extract. This right here is a Superglobal variable called the request. Now what that means is if I either got a get or a post, I can extract the variables based on the name attributes from the form or from the query parameters that came in. All right? I could do this with the post Superglobal. I could actually rewrite that and put post. Then I'm going to extract those. This extract will extract them into the variables based on their keys. And their keys are what the name attributes are. Do you remember I showed you your underscore name, your underscore phone, and your underscore email underscore adder? That's kind of magical, isn't it? you probably don't want to do this, okay, for security reasons. Because who can look at your form? Everybody. Make sense? Okay. All right, so let's just go grab this. Post process, post form process.php. All right, new file, post form process.php. Paste that in. So, okay, now we'll dig into this a little more using the post superglobal variable in a few minutes. But does that make sense what's going on here? There's a lot of magic that is happening in this form, this right here. In fact, whenever you see something, I have no idea what that is. What should you do?
Find out what it is.
Right, so hey, if I just type PHP extract, Google will do something miraculous for me, and the very first link is where I really probably want to go. Import variables into the current symbol table from an array. What? What does that mean? Oh, by the way, warning, do not use extract on untrusted data like user input. I did say something like that. So there are probably some examples down here on how it's being used. Here's an example. Let's say I have an array. By the way, this is a associative array. I have a key and a value. Okay, a key and a value. We'll talk more about those as we go. The post superglobal is an associative array. It associates the name attribute in your form with what the user entered in that text entry. Okay, so here I've got this var array. So I'm going to extract var array into, well, I can add a prefix right here. I don't know what the heck that is. Echo, color, size, shape. Okay, so that's what this is doing, shape, and I don't know what the WDDX size is. I guess it's the same thing. If I don't have this prefix and I use the same, you can see I'm getting these variables created right here, and it's using these as the keys right here will contain this value. So the variable color will contain blue, the variable size will contain medium, the variable shape will contain sphere. And it shows you the output right here. Okay? I don't know why that one's large. Because I don't even, oh, there it is right there. I see. Okay. Okay. All right, I have I'm lying to you. I'm not going to talk to you about cross-site request forgery or cross-site scripting attacks in week 15. However, I do have a really nice link here at the OWASP. OWASP stands for, hold on, about OWASP. Here we go. Open Web Application Security Project. This is a great site to go to make sure that you are not creating vulnerable websites. So they're going to talk about session hijacking, cross-site scripting attacks, which is basically having somebody enter in JavaScript into your form and then redirecting you to their website. Okay. All of the web applications that you write up until week 6 are going to be vulnerable to SQL injection. And I'll talk about that, right? In fact, when you do the Mad Libs project or anyone and you enter in an apostrophe, you're going to get an error. It's not going to work. Why? Because you closed your SQL statement. And now you have malformed SQL for the rest of it. That's not going to make sense to you now, but it will make sense to you when you see that error. Okay, rules to code by. PHP code is always enclosed in this left angle bracket question mark PHP and the question mark right angle bracket. So all the code that Apache encounters in between these gets sent off to the PHP interpreter. Every PHP statement must end with a semicolon. If there is any PHP code in a web page, the file on the web server should be named with a .php extension, not the .html. Okay? PHP variable names must begin with a $sign. Here's an example. A variable name must be at least 1 character in length. The first character after the $sign can be a letter or an underscore, and characters after that can be a letter, an underscore, or a number. Spaces and special characters other than underscore and $sign are not allowed in any part of a variable name. If you create a user-defined variable, please do not start it with an underscore, because now you will confuse people, because the PHP community thinks that variables that start with underscores are reserved PHP variables, and they'll go, oh wow, did 7.2 introduce a new variable? I wonder what that is. Okay, so don't do that. Let's talk about the post Superglobal. It's a special variable. They call them Superglobals, built into PHP that holds form data and is available throughout an entire script. Post is an array, and you access the form data by using the name attributes as indexed keys into the array. So an example would help. Let's take a look at this example. There's no CSS here, so it's ugly. All right. So I've got an HTML file called fullname.html. Let's look at the form. I have an action attribute that's set to bring up fullname.php once it's posted. I have a text input for the first name. I've got ID and name attributes. I only really care about the name attributes. And one for the last name. And then I have a submit button. The two name attributes in the form are first name and last name. You access the data in those name attributes by using first name and last name as index keys into the post Superglobal. Okay? I'll walk through that. So let's create a file called fullname.html. Okay, you can feel free to do this if you want as well. So there it is. And if I run it, sure is ugly, isn't it? I didn't even put a label in here. Okay. And if I select report full name, I get a 404 error because I have not written that script yet. So let's take a look at this script right here. Super simple script. What am I doing? I'm extracting from the post Superglobal variable, because this is from a post, whatever's in the key at first name and last name. Okay, so that's this. That's this entry. First name and last name is this entry right here. Now I can use these straight out, or I can assign them to variables like I did here. Either way is fine. And all I'm doing here is I'm echoing out, hi, first name, last name, thanks for submitting the form. Pretty simple, right? So let me go and grab this and create fullname.php. paste that in. So if we run the full name.html, I put Ken, and I put Marks, put report full name, hi Ken Marks, thanks for submitting the form. Pretty straightforward, right? And it's pretty slick. It's pretty easy to get data into a web page, to get data into your PHP script at this point. That's essentially what Chapter 1 is asking you to do, right? Okay. Let's get into the stuff for Chapter 2. All right. That means we've got to introduce databases. So, a MySQL server can contain multiple databases. PHP can communicate easily with your database. Each database can have multiple tables. Fantastic. So, I would like to walk through this demo lab with you. Okay, and what we're going to do is we are going to create a database called Northwind. We're going to do a couple things. Let me see. Yep, we're going to create a Northwind database, and then we're also going to create a table. We're going to create another database called whatever our Madison College email username is, and we're going to create a table called full name, and we're going to use it with the form that we just created in the script that we just created, the full name one that we just did. But first, I'm going to sit down while we do this, and I want you to walk through this with me, because there's a couple of things that I'm probably going to be introducing to you. Some of you may have seen. Who's run Unix before? Who's used the terminal window in Unix before? Okay, great. Okay, so this should be somewhat familiar to you. For those of you that it's not, I'll kind of walk through that with you. All right, so first thing we need to do is bring up a terminal window or a console window. So if you go into your Cloud9 development environment, and by the way, you have 2 monitors, so I would recommend putting the instructions on one monitor and also your web page output on one monitor and your development environment on the other monitor. Okay, so I'm going to dismiss these things right here. Now, if I click on this plus sign right here, you can come down here to New Terminal, and there's also these keyboard shortcuts right here too. If you click New Terminal, I get this. Who's seen this before? Okay, great. You know what this is. It's Unix. This is how, ever since the 60s, maybe even the 50s, when computers started coming online, online is not a great word, but when we started, this is how we talk to computers, through a terminal interface. Anybody know when the visual interface with a mouse was, well, invented as a... Anybody know who invented it? The visual interface? It was Xerox, and it was stolen by Apple.
Okay.
Okay?
Makes sense.
Yep. And the first, Mac, they introduced Mac OS, but mainstream PCs, when did you first start seeing a visual interface out of the boys and girls from Redmond, Washington? I think it was 91 or 92. Windows 3.0 was a failure. Windows 3.1, about 3.0, 3.1. Okay. Before that, what was Microsoft making?
DOS.
MS-DOS.
Yeah, that I know.
Okay, MS-DOS. Because that's how we communicated
Right.
with our computer, without a mouse. All right. This interface has been around for 50 some odd years. It works great. There's really no need to change it that much. Okay, if you go over to this navigation window right here, collapse all these folders, if you have some folders, and you see this, right? Something like that. You probably have labs, projects, right? And then you certainly have this readme.md, unless you deleted it, a php.ini. I hope you didn't delete that. and a hello world.php, and you may have deleted that. You see all this in here on your, okay, great. See this right here? Well, that's your username, right, that you logged in as, okay? And then you got a colon, and then you have this tilde, and the tilde is your home directory.
Okay.
And then we've got this slash and a workspace. That workspace is the same thing as this right here. Because if I want to get a directory listing, what is the command that I need to use, you Unix people? You remember?
ls.
ls. Oh, how cryptic that is. Okay, ls stands for listing. Okay. What do you see here? I see these directories over here and these files, right? This is an interface that always works. Okay. So let's say I want to go down to Spring 2019. By the way, ls is, you'll use that one a lot. What if I want to go into this Spring 2019 directory? What is that command I need?
cd.
cd for change directory.
Oh, so it's the same.
Name of the, yeah, Spring. Oh, check this out. I can start typing SP and hit the tab key, not that little p, hit the tab key, and it goes out as far as it can. If I hit tab a couple times, it'll say, well, you got 2 of them here. Which one do you want? Okay? So now I'm there, and look, it's telling me where I'm at. And if there's any doubt where I'm at, I could type, how do I get the full, complete working directory? Does anybody remember that one? PWD for print working directory. That gives me all the way up to the absolute path. Absolute paths are denoted with a /. Okay? Home, Ubuntu, Workspace, Spring 2019. Okay? By the way, if I want to know about the ls command, I could type into my Google browser here, man for man page, ls. Linux manual page. And you get something cryptic looking like this. Now, they all look like this. And after you figure out how to do this, these are all these command arguments on here. Oh, I got these switches. Oh, what the heck? Well, I'm going to use this -l, and I'm going to use this -a. What does that mean? All, do not ignore entry starting with dot, which is the current directory. L, use a long listing format. Let's try that out. ls space -al. Excellent. Look at that. I get size of the files, current directory. Well, it looks like I can navigate up with here too. And I got this stuff. Tells me, this first location tells me if it's a directory or not. Okay. In fact, I'm going to go down into lecture demos. I'm going to go down to TR. And I'm going to go to week 2. Okay. So these are not directories. These are files. RWX looks like read, write. This is for the owner. That's me. This is for anybody in the group. Don't worry about this stuff. And this is for everybody else. Everybody else has read-only privileges. They can't write to it. They can't execute it. Okay? So Unix is an interesting operating system because it sets privileges and access rights for each file or file location. And everything in Unix is a file. If you want to be a professional PHP developer, you might want to consider learning a little more about Unix. It's pretty simple. It's not insurmountable. It's pretty easy. We have a great class, Linux Server 1. I would recommend taking it. It's super easy. In fact, it's a great class to take over the summer if you're only going to take one class. First 3 weeks, you're spending time navigating the operating system, learning about the file system, and then you start installing packages like Apache and MySQL and FTP and Mail and things like that. And you learn how to maintain it. And it's pretty simple. In fact, it used to be before we split IT into programmers and infrastructure, programmers did all this stuff. That's what we did. And it wasn't until like the, I want to say mid to late 90s. Late 90s is really when IT infrastructure became a career, with the advent of networking becoming so prevalent. Okay. All right. So that's how we navigate around here. This is called the bash shell. This terminal window right here stands for born again shell. If you're a computer scientist and you invent something, you get to name it whatever you want. So they started out with shell, then born shell, then the born again shell. Okay. Let's go back to this. Oh, by the way, one other thing. If I want to, I'm just going to get rid of this right here. If I want to go up one directory, I can type cd ... Okay. All right. So I'm actually in my week 2 directory for spring 2019 lecture demos. That's right here. So this is where I'm at. And you saw when I did a listing, this is what I got. Okay. All right. What is it that I want us to do? All right. First thing I want you to do is I want you to use the wget command to get this SQL file off of my server. And the best way to do that is, rather than spelling the whole thing out, just copy and paste this whole command right here. Wget stands for web get. I'm basically getting the file and downloading it right in this local directory. So if I copy that, if you all do that, and I paste this right here, I should see this. You should see that. And I have a northwind.sql file right here. Do you all have that? So that was wget http ://Flibberty Giblets. That's FLIBERTIGIBLETS.com /files/northwind.sql.
What page is the code that we copied that from? Like, and the instructions?
Oh, if you, yeah, demo lab right here.
Demo, okay.
Demo lab. Okay. All right, is everybody there?
Oh, yeah. So here's, it was week 2, and then I went to demo.
Okay, we good? All right.
Yeah. Terminal, you go plus, and then hit new terminal, or you can Alt-T.
Right. See this right here? Watch. If I click on this plus sign, click on new terminal, now I open up a terminal window. And go navigate to, I'll show you another thing that's really cool. If you don't even want to do that, go over to your directory where you want to do this, right click, and say open terminal here.
Oh, that's even better.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to show you the old school way to do it first.
Yeah.
Okay? So, okay, we all have the northwind.sql file? All right, next thing. You want to log in to your MySQL command line tool. Let's do that. We do that by typing mysql space -u space root. And you can just paste that right here, Command V. We are no longer in the bash shell. How do I know that? I don't see this $ thing right over here, okay? I see MySQL greater than. Okay? We are now in the MySQL command line tool.
I did not get there.
So if you exit out, type, if you're in there, you can type exit. You
Okay.
type this, MySQL space -u space root. Now if you didn't get there, what color is this?
Oh, yeah.
Run that, because if you didn't get in there and you got some error, that's because you're not running your server.
Yeah, that'll do it. Why isn't it running?
So just press the arrow and press that green play button. Now you should.
Got it. Thank you.
Then you should be in. Okay. All right. Next thing we want to do is create a database. Create a Northwind database. Type create space database space Northwind semicolon. It should say not that. And the reason why is because I already created it. Okay, so I already have a Northwind database. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say drop database Northwind, and that will drop it. And then if I say create, now it'll create it. Okay? All right, so you should have created a database. You could say show databases, and I have a bunch of databases in here, but I have a Northwind database right here. Okay. Next thing you do is type exit. That gets us back to the bash shell. So once we're in the bash shell, I want you to take this command right here. I'm going to explain it to you in a second. You're going to type MySQL, not in the MySQL tool, but on the bash shell. MySQL space -u space root, because you got to tell it who you are. And then you want to specify the Northwind database, and then a space, and then a left angle bracket, and then the name of the file that we just downloaded, which is northwind.sql. Now the reason that we're doing this is this is a Unix special thing called redirection. How are you interacting right now with this shell? With your keyboard, right? So standard in is from the keyboard. What you're doing is you're redirecting standard input from that file to go ahead and put all the commands to create, to suck in the tables to the Northwind database that you just created. Okay? So copy and paste this whole line like this onto the command line. Press enter. And in true Unix fashion, you should get no response. So if something didn't work, you would have gotten an error. Well, how do I know it works? So log back into MySQL. So that's MySQL space -u space root. And type use Northwind. Now I've changed databases to Northwind. And I want to show tables. And look, I got all these Northwind tables in here. In fact, I could say select star. You guys remember how to do some select stuff? From products. That's everything in the products table. Pretty cool, right? Although it looks kind of ugly in ASCII art, right? So let's do that next. So if you go to the part 2 of the lab, this is where we are going to create a database. So my example uses my Madison College email address. All right. So make sure that you are in your MySQL command line tool, right? And you know it because you see this right here. Next thing you want to do is you want to create a database using your Madison College username. So I'm using mine. So first type create database, whatever your Madison College email address is. Do not forget the semicolon. Some of you have run into the issue where you keep getting the right angle bracket because you didn't finish that SQL statement. Okay, so create database. Mine's going to be with my Madison College email. You should get not an error because I've already created one. So I'm going to drop that one. Okay, so I'll say drop database KE marks 1, and then I'll create it. So there we go. I created an empty database with my Madison College email address. Next thing you want to do is use that database that you just created. So whatever you called it, you should see the database changed. Next thing we're going to do is create a table. Everybody is creating a table called full name. I want you to use this following statement. Create space table space full name. Then in parentheses, first underscore name. The data type is variable character. We're going to talk about this, I think, next week, of up to 20 characters. That's what a varchar is. Comma, last name, space, varchar 20. Close, and those are in parentheses too for the varchar, the number 20. Then you're finally closing the parentheses on this full name, create table, and then a semicolon. What did we do? This creates a table called full name with 2 columns, one called first underscore name, one called last underscore name. The data types are varchar 20 for both of them. So I'm going to grab this whole piece of code right here. Do not include the right angle bracket. Paste that in. Okay, so that's create table full name, parentheses first underscore name, space varchar 20 in parentheses, comma, last underscore name, space varchar 20 in parentheses, comma, close the parentheses, semicolon, query OK, rows affected, nothing. Now if I type describe full name, semicolon, that's what I get. My fields, you should see this, varchar, that. Yes?
I think my name breaks the syntax or something, so I've got a hyphenated last name.
Yeah, okay, so you have to drop the hyphen.
Yeah, it still doesn't say that I have database.
It's like sometimes my commands work.
Let's see.
Maybe there's just like one tiny thing you're missing.
That's what I'm saying, it's gotta be me.
Okay. Jim said query OK.
Okay.
All right, so you
But
may
I was trying to write that.
oh, because you forgot the semicolon
No,
on
over
the
there.
previous ones.
I
Yes. Okay.
Okay, do you mind?
No worries. Okay, next step. Now that we have this database, let's insert something. So I can insert my name into the full name database that I just created by typing insert space into space full name parentheses first underscore name. That's the field name for the first name, comma, last underscore name, close the parentheses, and then I follow with the word values, and then in parentheses, I've got the 2 strings, Ken, comma, marks, in single quotes. Close those parentheses and a semicolon. So if I copy and paste this whole thing, and I paste this in here, I should say query OK 1 row affected. How do I know it's in there? Select star from full name, semicolon. There we go. Once everybody has gotten this far, I'm going to go ahead and resume the lecture on how we add code so we can insert data into that form, or data that we insert into that form goes into the database. Okay? Who needs a couple minutes? We good? Couple? You need a couple minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. How we doing?
Okay.
We good?
For me, I think I would be.
Okay, we ready to go? All right. Okay, so if I can get your attention, here's what we're going to do. So if you go back to the lecture notes under adding data to a database using a form in MySQLi, we can use the same form that we created above. That's this form right here. Remember, this is the form that we entered stuff in. It looks pretty horrible. Full name.html. And what we're going to do is we're going to add to this code right here, basically at line 12, we're going to put a few lines of code in here to go ahead and take the data from the post Superglobal or that we got right here, and we're going to insert it into the database. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is connect to the database in our PHP using the function mysql connect. So if I go out to the manual, it tells me how to use it. mysqli connect. It's got 4 parameters. The first one is the URL. Who's ever seen 127.0.0.1? Who owns a shirt that says there's no place like 127.0.0.1? Come on, fess up. Okay, that's like home, right? All right. This is also another word for local. You may have seen the string localhost. That's what most people put in there, localhost. Okay, that's the server location of my database, which happens to be our local host. This is my username. Our username is what? How have we been using the MySQL command line, getting into MySQL command line tool? Root. How secure, right? And what password does root have? Nothing. Nothing. Yeah, so you put root in here. Would you do this for a real deployed website? Absolutely not. Okay, so and then here in this string, you just put quote unquote, nothing in between the quotes. This is the name of your database. What's the name of our database? We just created it. What's it called?
Whatever you created.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Whatever it is. So mine would be KE marks 1. Okay, correct. Okay, great. That's how we connect. So we need one of those. You also need this statement right here, just like this. This is a line continuation. It actually should be like 8 spaces. Or die. What did I say? 90% of your errors are going to be what kind of errors? That's right. Malformed SQL. Could be in the form of, no, I misspelled the name of the database, or I didn't write the credentials in correctly. You're also going to have an or die statement for a query that you do. Your book is going to show you in the first couple of chapters to use the or die. Then all of the starter code, for some reason, they forgot to put or dies on 3 and 4. On up. They forget to do them. So you need to add them in because you're going to go ahead and say, my code's not working and I don't know why. And I'm going to say, are you sure your database queries are working? Remember what I said? Yeah, they're working fine. I'm not getting any errors. How do you know? Do you have or die statements? Oh, no, I don't. Okay? All right. So we need to connect to our database. Localhost, these are the credentials. You're going to change this. Or die trying. A nice error message would be error connecting to MySQL server or error connecting to this database. Whatever. Next, we need to build our query string and store it into a variable. So a query string would look kind of like this. It looks exactly like what we just entered, right, on the command line, with the exception that I have these $ first name, $ last name, which are these things right up here, right? Okay, so those are the variables I extracted out from the post Superglobal. Now, this is variable interpolation. Why? because these are double quoted strings out here, right? And I can embed single quoted strings inside there because I need that for my SQL statement. I've concatenated this using the period. I got a semicolon right here. All right. Then we pass the query to the database using the mysqli query function. That takes two parameters. The database connection. See, when I created the connection right here, it returns a database connection that I store in the variable. I call it DBC for database connection. So I'm going to go ahead and pass two things to the mysqli query function. The first parameter is the database connection. The second parameter is the query string that I just created up here, or die trying. This is where you'll get a lot more of these errors because these tend to be more malformed. Okay? Finally, you're going to close the connection using mysqli close database connection. Now, there are a lot of people in the PHP community that say, oh, it'll close when it goes out of scope or whatever. But, I think it's a good idea to open your connection, create your query, do your query, close your connection. Get in, get out, nobody gets hurt. Because if you don't close that database connection, you're waiting for it to go out of scope from the PHP interpreter, and a thread is running. Now let's just say, for argument's sake, that you're running a competitive shipping company to UPS, and you've got as big of a customer base as UPS. First off, you're not going to run your server on your local host as your web server. You're probably going to run your server, I don't know, in some load-balanced server farm. Now, everybody's tracking their packages because they're all Prime customers, right? Amazon Prime customers. And so you got 10,000 simultaneous queries going on. Do you think you want to leave your database connection open? No. So if you write code like that where you don't close the connection, some bad things can happen, potentially. All right? So I think it's a good idea to do that. All right. So these are the, let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3, these 4 lines of code that we essentially have to add. That's these lines of code right here. So if I add these lines of code to my script, let's go find my script. You want to add that to your fullname.php. Here it is, right here. There they are. So I added my connection string right after here. My query string, my actual query, my close connection. I added that in between, grabbing them from the post Superglobal, so lines 9 and 10. Right after lines 9 and 10, I added it, and right before the echo statement. So if all goes well, I can go to my horrible form right here, and I can type in, I already have one entry, so I got a brother and a sister. I'll put them in there. And if I go out to MySQL right here, and I press the up arrow and say select star from full name, check that out. Who got that working? What do you think?
It's cool.
That is cool, isn't
Better
it?
than emails.
Huh? Better than right, emails with Owen's abducted dog,
Right.
Fang. I could do this again, right? I'll go ahead and I've got a sister as well. There we go. Press the up arrow. Voila. Okay, so if anybody is having trouble getting this working, let me know. I want to make sure that you leave here and have this working. Yes?
Yeah, I keep getting this error that says cannot post.
Okay. Let me come around and take a look at that.
Yeah, I'm getting the same error.
Okay, I'll come around and take a look at that. Here's the thing. Before I end the screencast, you have all the knowledge you need at this point to finish up chapters 1 and chapter 2 and get that posted to me before midnight on Thursday. Okay? Get that posted in Blackboard. If you have any trouble, reach out to me via Slack or email. Okay? If you're not on Slack, get on Slack. If you can't find the invite or whatever, email me and I will get you an invite. You should be able to find it in the announcement page on Blackboard. Okay? We cool? All right. Let me end the screencast, and then I'm going to walk around to make sure everybody is in the place that they need to be. Obviously, we're not having lab. And for my Tuesday night class, because I'm going to post this screencast, they need to get everything posted by midnight tonight. So if any of my Tuesday night class happens to run into struggles, please reach out to me before midnight tonight, and I can work through that with you. Okay. We'll stop this.